Welcome back, 4% business owners who are aspiring to turn your business into a wealth engine and curious to find what are the things that those successful businesses do that might help you propel forward. I am so glad you're here today. In some ways, our topic today sounds like a single topic, but in reality, it's something I talk about with clients and see in how their minds open up every day. And it is about you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And there's a Mark Twain quote about that. It's not what you know, it's what you know for certain that just ain't so that really puts a hurting to you. And in business, when you reach that stage where you're not so scared, not so insecure, not putting that facade up, and you see a level of success you're achieving, often what will happen is you suddenly discover that you know nothing at all, right? And we've all been there. We get into the Dunning-Kruger effect where we're like, I know everything. I've read a book on the thing. I've got this business. I'm bringing in clients. And then as you move through and gain experience, you realize there's so much that you don't know.
So much about business.
And so with biases, bottlenecks, and blind spots that bog down business owners, part of them is it's a brain thing, right? As a neurolinguistic programming coach, I aim for results, and the neuro side of it is really key. Understanding how your brain is actually sabotaging you actively, trying to keep you from being a bold business owner and keeping you safe in your cave eating the red berries because you know they don't kill you. That is a big piece of the biases and the blind spots. We filter out our world and we design these heuristics to problem solve that aren't really based on our brilliant prefrontal cortex, but are really more about our reptilian brain.
And we, on the financial side of the work that we do with clients, often see the results of those biases showing up in the clients, both their business results as well as their wealth accumulation over time.
Yeah. One of the great things that I love that Jim does for clients, I will do some of that coaching and I'll find that people are really attached to their business and enmeshed in their business, right? It's their baby. And that's not unusual, and it's actually biologically sound. We have this Ikea effect that is one of the biases. I made it myself, it must have value. And we have this emotional desire to look for proof that that business is going to succeed, which can mean we're not looking at the things that we should be looking at. So when we take that out and we say, let's put your business on the table in numbers, we see evidence right in that product line level of this bias. And that can be a challenge to combat. Mm-hmm. But revealing it helps blow away the bias. And that's what we're looking for, is how do you blow away the bias in a business? Because it's not about what do I love. It's about how do I create a business that is a wealth engine.
Absolutely. And the passion, we've talked before about the stages that all businesses go through as they grow. And when you're in that survival stage, as you're becoming stable, that passion is really an underpinning that keeps entrepreneurs going, that love for their business. It can be cold, but the cold reality of putting the numbers out on the table and having a sort of an unvarnished view of how the business is performing, what those numbers tell you about your decision making is just a critical component of that. While you're having the passion, stepping back and making some well-founded perspective-based decisions on your business.
I think it was the movie The Truth About Cats and Dogs, where the lady character in it says, you should love your pet, but you shouldn't love your pet. And that's, it's important to have that passion in your business.
Absolutely.
It keeps you going. It can also, and it's awareness that we're building in this episode today, is awareness is magical. Awareness that it can go too far, that you dial up that passion and you can cloud your judgment. It's like falling in love. all of those flaws that you're going to discover in a few years about your partner, you don't even see them in those first few years.
Right. It's interesting to take the numbers, which are the manifestation of the owner's passion in building their business, and recognize that the things that the business owner can't see can really hurt them. Mm-hmm. And they're not seeing them for willfully not seeing them for the most part. Mm-hmm. They're not seeing them because they don't know what to look for in those numbers.
Absolutely. You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know.
You end up with these blind spots that come from assumptions. Right. And so we had a client in yesterday. His assumption was he had to give raises, do profit sharing, come up with a way, because he knew his team that he had hired was amazing and he wanted to keep them. He had never heard of a health savings account. He had not heard of the product of being able to do an employee savings account. He would have put them in place years ago.
Right.
But he'd never heard of them. So he was just giving raises, which can actually, in some ways, just be an insulting Band-Aid mm-hmm. to put on the situation.
And permanent, because you've raised your cost base permanently when you make those kinds of decisions. Not that it's a bad thing to give raises, but that really needs to be done very thoughtfully in an organization. And to continue along the theme of, incenting employees or wanting to reward employees, salaries are one of, or maybe the baseline component of the process of managing your human resources. I mean, we've got a model that we've developed that we work with business owners on, which is, the acronym is AIR with 2 R's. So attract, incent, reward, and retain your employees, of which salary is obviously an important part, but there are so many aspects to that, some of which are financial, like group benefits, and a lot of which are cultural. And if you're not familiar with the framework, you're probably not using all the tools at your disposal from a impact perspective as well as a cost perspective to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve with your employees.
Right, and so then as you're doing these raises, what's fascinating is if you do them during a performance evaluation, way to go, but you see this happy employee in the moment going, thank you for valuing my work, which brings in your confirmation bias that says, I think this is the right answer. I've seen small evidence that it's the right answer, any evidence it's the right answer. And if you don't know what to measure, that's it, you're done. That's your entire problem-solving process. Right. It's important to recognize that there are different ways to evaluate what is the truth, right? If you ask somebody, hey, do you like my jacket? I have already colored that by being in person, not making it anonymous, having a relationship with you that, now Jim would tell me the truth because Jim's that kind of guy, but someone else might just say, oh yeah, it's beautiful. So how do I measure where the truth is more accurately? And it may never occur to me, and in this case I will not. But you may choose.
That's a great jacket.
But in various places, there are times where you're not getting the truth. You're making assumptions. And assumptions are the biggest blind spots we have. They let us move forward. And if we don't know that there are other criteria, ways to evaluate things, or that we don't feel we have the skills to use those tools to evaluate them, we get stuck in this vicious cycle. And another thing that you don't see, as you mentioned, right, you're raising your expenses. And if your business is doing well and it's growing and it's justifying it, that's lovely. But what you don't necessarily see is that long-term thinking of the future, that you're going to have this dip. And if you're not watching cash flow and you don't have the ability to do long-term thinking, which humans are not actually born with, then you've got these expenses up here and your income's up here, and then this happens.
Right.
You forget to look and say, how do I streamline? Who do I have to fire or cut back hours on? And that is something we intentionally put our head in the sands and don't want to look at, because it can feel like failing.
A a large part of our business is planning for personal financial well-being as well as corporate financial well-being. And the heart of planning is assumptions. And the assumptions that are unexamined are the assumptions that are going to cause problems. And for a business owner who understands their business particularly well, and working with us to bring the sort of financial discipline to get every key assumption, not every assumption, but every key assumption out on the table, and then to test the business owner's assessment of that assumption in the long term. So all planning is based on assumptions. The assumptions that are problematic are the ones that don't get examined rigorously enough. And if you build a plan based on, what you'd probably want to call a reasonable set of assumptions, then you have the ability to take actions to affect those assumptions in order to produce a different outcome. But until you've got an assembled set of assumptions in a format where you can look at it to make decisions, which typically is a business plan for business owners, or a marketing plan, or a human resources plan, or an operations plan, you're not going to be able to make the right decisions, and you're flying blind, basically.
It's a lot, when you come to see Podium Prosperity Group, it's a lot like visiting the Wizard of Oz, right? Oz, the great and terrible. So a few things would happen, right? The great and terrible, meaning powerful but hard. We ask some great and terrible questions that allow you to do the what ifs. What if things go incredibly well? What if things go incredibly bad? And we ask questions that you wouldn't have thought of, because it's really our job to uncover blind spots, biases, and the bottlenecks in the business. So we ask questions you may not have thought of, or that you may think it's too soon. Right? That bias as well of I'm not successful enough yet. And that there's some level of undefined success in which you could qualify for wise advice to guide your business forward.
Absolutely. A really important part of that process of having the hard questions asked then is to capture the underlying assumptions, because there are going to be deviations. That's the nature of planning, is that it's going to be reality is going to be different than whatever it is you assumed. The process, the discipline of capturing the assumptions that underlie whatever projections it is that you're producing, is the tool that allows you to make better assumptions, to modify your decisions later. Because if you don't remember what the assumption was that got you to the point where you're having a result that is either better or worse, then you have no way to improve your planning process.
Right. You can't, I tell people, if you have no goals, then you're done, right?
Yeah.
You've already achieved everything. So there's nothing to measure, there's nothing to do, there's nothing to motivate you. And some of the questions we ask are, is this a business in which you someday would like to have succession to your children? Are they actually interested in that idea? Is this a business you'd like to someday sell? The answers to those questions change your business model. They change how your financial modeling of your business is laid out. And that blind spot can get in the way for many business owners. They don't realize that their business model has to match their final exit plan.
Yes.
And I've met many, back as a web designer, I spent 15 years working with very small businesses who thought, I am going to give my blood, sweat, tears, heart, soul, marriage to this business, and someday I'm going to prove everyone wrong, and I'm going to sell this business, and that'll make it all good in the end. They don't realize, they don't know what they don't know. Selling a business is easy. Jim taught me this. It needs to be able to make a profit beyond your lifestyle and operate without you.
Absolutely.
A business that destroys families, marriages, and health is not a saleable business. It has to come with you as the slave when you sell it. It does not function as a business.
Right. However your actual results are going to turn out, and hopefully you're in a regular planning process that allows you to make decisions as you go. One of the biases that I think business owners really have to look for when they're making those, when they're updating their plans, and we've seen it quite a lot, share, is commonly known as the sunk cost bias. And what happens there to business owners is they look at a decision. A good example might be, I tried this product in my business and it didn't work. I tried selling this thing and it didn't work. I bought a machine to tackle a particular market segment and that didn't work. And that could extend all the way out to whatever your succession plans are. You can't undo your past decisions. So whatever the decision was that allowed you or made you launch that product or buy that machine or think about your succession in a particular way, if assumptions need to change, if facts change and that asset doesn't perform the way you wanted it to, you can't drag that decision into the future. You can't say, I've already put $100,000 into this machine, so I have to make it work. Right. So there's a line there between not giving up soon enough and understanding the assumptions that are guiding the profitability of that particular product or machine going forward. But if it truly is not going to be successful, it's important to walk away. And we all, as human beings, have a very hard time walking away from our prior decisions where we've invested time or money in.
Absolutely. And this is really when you have a CEO mindset, one of the things that you're looking for is fail points. You are celebrating finding them. Mm-hmm. The faster you find them, the more exciting it is, because now you know this doesn't work and we don't have to waste any more time doing this. And you just take the emotion out, cut the string, and say, what next?
Absolutely.
It's a massive skill. And as you look at the rest of society and say, but nobody else can do that, why should I be able to do that? It isn't easy. It is a very hard thing. It's why you need outside perspectives, because none of us do this naturally ourselves. It's a very deep bias that allows you to keep moving in a way that hasn't killed you yet.
Is that a skill that can be developed, that developing the perspective to step away from that sunk cost bias? There
is. You can develop different pathways in your brain. You're actually strengthening the pathways in your prefrontal cortex to overcome the pathways in your emotional limbic system of your brain. So we think of our personality as being up here in our cortex, in our prefrontal cortex. The signals from that area of our brain are so weak and so slow that they don't function well during stress. But you can grow them. You can actually get them to be more powerful. And the way to do that is to have a skill and a space set aside. As a business owner, you need to have time when you're working on the business. And people hear that, but they don't know what it means. But it means you're planning, you're being the visionary leader in your business, and you're setting aside time to say, what didn't work last week? What are my plans for next week? And really digging into the what ifs and asking yourself questions so that you get habituated into naturally asking those questions. Hey, let's launch this new product line in May. It's going to be incredible. We're going to tap into the boat show, and let's invest all this money now to go to the boat show and launch this product. Is the boat show going to run, first of all, right? In times of uncertainty, you write that out and you then look at it intentionally. And I tell people you have to actually get it out of your body, out of your brain, onto paper. And this is how we combat every bias, every blind spot. And don't just go new product launch. That's not writing it out. It's full sentences that if you handed that to me, I would be able to go, oh, you're considering this, and these are the ways that you're considering doing it. Then you say, what are all the assumptions in there? And you write them down. Right? This is also how you get rid of trauma, by the way. Get it out of your body and onto paper. So this is a way to prevent trauma. What are all the assumptions in this concept, in this opportunity that I've captured? And you look at all those assumptions, and then to test them, your first step is to say, what if the opposite's true? Right? The ability to be flexible in your thinking is a higher level adulting that 65% of adults don't work on. Once you've tested those assumptions, and you say, which of these are still holding valid? Not from the gut, but from explicating and really teasing it out. Then you ask somebody who's not in your industry or a mentor in your industry, and ideally both, to say, here's what I'm thinking. And it doesn't even have to be an urgent problem to teach yourself this new skill. It just needs to be, I think chocolate cake with chocolate icing is the right decision.
Right.
Practicing.
It's always the right decision.
I won't test this with Jim. But what are all the assumptions? I assume that cake is a good decision. And what is a good decision? What am I assuming?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Where am I making emotional decisions? And many of these biases, the reason they exist is they are highly valuable. They allow you to not get bogged down in the minutiae of day-to-day life. I can just eat the chocolate cake.
And the small business owner often doesn't have the ability to get that perspective internally.
Yes.
The saying is, it's lonely at the top. You're usually operating not in a vacuum, but in a sort of a confirmatory mechanism of your own making.
Mm-hmm.
We benefit here in our business because we have 3 partners, and we're able to hold each other to account and to gently say, does that sound like it's the right thing to do? So it produces a larger number of clients to surround yourself with a group of mentors if you are lonely at the top in your business as a business owner, which is often the case, often not a partnership model. Mm-hmm. Interesting experience from my background in biotech. So one of my mentors, and we were 3 owners of the business, we built an entire business plan and secured funding to create a genetic test for colon cancer.
Right.
And we spent almost 3 years working to get it to market. And the underpinning rationale for the product in the marketplace was that you could have you could avoid the cost in the healthcare system of unnecessary colonoscopies.
Right.
Because colonoscopies are risky, the compliance is terrible. Only about 5% of the people who ever get told to go get a colonoscopy actually get it done.
Right.
So terrible compliance and a high cost and some morbidity associated with it. So we built this test. In retrospect, it would have been really good on our board of advisors to have had an internal medicine person, but we didn't. So Things you learn. And we got 3 years into this product, and we discovered that the results of the test were statistically significant, but not medically significant enough for the specialists who do colonoscopies to want to run the test to get the results. Even though the economics worked and the product made sense and it would hopefully save some lives and certainly save a lot of costs, the actual consumer of the product, which was the doctor who would recommend the test, so we shot the product.
Wow.
It was our only product at the time. We had to go looking for another product because we had the team and the expertise. And after 3 years, so the learning there is we didn't quite have the right people testing our assumptions from the get-go, but we had developed a full business plan and the product looked like it made sense to us.
Right.
So, interesting experience.
Yeah, I would imagine there was a lot of sunk cost in there.
There was a lot of sunk cost in there and ownership because this was our product. We had created it. It was novel in the marketplace. It looked like it had tremendous potential.
And innovators avoid one, or tend to think they're avoiding another bias, which is status quo. Mm-hmm. Right? The status quo bias says the way it's already happening is the way it should happen. And that in innovation, something you would have bumped up against as you brought this product forward is the idea, especially if it's lucrative, right? That the government funds medical procedures. The government may want something that the doctors will refuse to do because the doctors receive money from that. And that status quo, they can absolutely say, as the doctors holding the power, this is the way it works. And if you change the model, then it's going to be hard to get doctors. It's going to be hard to keep things moving. And people are terrified of disrupting status quo.
Absolutely. Just funny that you would say that. So the product that we brought out after the colon cancer test was a test that ultimately for an eye disease that would have shifted power from ophthalmologists to optometrists. And there was a very large amount of pushback in the marketplace because we were challenging the status quo with a product.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And status quo shows up in your business. Back as a web designer, I'd ask people how they were marketing their business, and you could see that they were looking at how other people in their industry did things and said, I want to do it like that, but better. And there's a phrase from Mike Michalowicz, he says, better isn't better, different is better. How do you stand out? The point of starting your business is you think that there is a niche in the marketplace. And so even from that very first startup day, looking and comparing yourself to other businesses like you makes you like them and makes you not a distinct offering.
Right.
And that can get you trapped in some bad decisions. And then once you've established your own status quo internally for your business, it can be very hard to change.
You can, a financial analogy for that is essentially if you're standing still, you're actually moving backwards, even though you may not be able to see it. And of course, in a financial sense, we do all our financial projections adjusted for inflation, because if your revenue is staying the same every year, it's actually eroding to the tune of 2% a year. So status quo is never an option for business owner. It's about making wise decisions to differentiate, making wise decisions with new products, and being having the ability to step back from them and know when the right point is to shut them down if they're not working and move on to something else. Which is very challenging when you're a very small business, because resources are very limited, and there are some fairly significant gambles that new business owners have to take in terms of launching their products.
And you may not know how to make a wise decision, right? And so if you're listening going, how do I know if it's a wise decision? There are actually processes. There is business know-how that even though your business is totally unique, 99% of the challenges you're facing are about business know-how. Absolutely. And really taking that opportunity and leading it forward. So a lot of what we talked about so far is the biases like sunk cost, confirmation bias, status quo, the Ikea effect, and the blind spots of those assumptions and missing the change that's happening in your business because of that status quo. They kind of play off each other very nicely.
Yeah, they're self-reinforcing in a way that needs to be thought through all the time.
The other thing that status quo idea is looking at all the gurus out in the world teaching you all the things about business, and there's so many of them, right? Mm-hmm. They're making a ton of money teaching you things about how to build more revenue, how to get better response to Facebook ads, and that can actually distract you and create new blind spots that distract you from the real numbers, right? You'll never sell yourself out of broke.
Right.
And there's a reason behind that. When you have somebody who's saying our revenue just isn't there, they're not hitting their bottom line, they're not hitting their numbers, and there's some different places that you would have them focus.
Yeah, we a very large part of our induction process with new clients, and we broadly categorize that as micro CFO work, is helping the business owner understand their financial statements in a way that allows them to discern the story that their numbers are supposed to be telling them. The story's actually there. It's like learning another language. Learning to read music. You need to learn to read financial statements. They all tell a story, and the key aspects of that story, or the moral of what your financial statements are telling you, is a really important, really early critical learning for most business owners that they can develop them with guidance. They can develop the skills to sort of be looking for the things that are going to matter to them as a business owner.
And at first it can be a little scary to start looking, right? But if you're not able to see those numbers, not knowing what you're focusing on, then you don't get that forward momentum. That blind spot becomes a huge bottleneck that you cannot move forward if you don't know where you are now. if you don't know where
Right.
you're heading and what's actually going to get you there. The level of analysis of product line profitability and margins and understanding what those mean, and in a way that is sexy and exciting as opposed to just the theory, right? When we're talking about your business and helping you understand your story, it's going to be exciting for you.
Absolutely.
Because it's what's empowering your dreams. And if you stop dreaming, we'll have a conversation about that another day. So all of these lead to a bunch of bottlenecks. One of the bottlenecks that people typically think of is the owner is usually the bottleneck in their own business.
Resources are everything in every business, and the allocation of resources to the the creation of profit is the most important role of the business owner, because all businesses have finite resources, and the best businesses make the best decisions about where to direct those resources. And when you're just starting out, that is your time, possibly also your money, possibly your in-laws' money, possibly your RRSP, but also your time, and making really wise decisions in those early days about allocating those resources, because they are a bottleneck to your growth, is critical.
Yeah, and I was introduced at a networking meeting a couple of weeks ago, and the lady who introduced me wrote the introduction herself, and she said, Cher is going to challenge your assumptions. She said something on her LinkedIn page that just knocked me on my butt. That one of the hardest realities of being a business owner, not self-employed, but a business owner, is that thing you're really good at doing, you need to stop doing it yourself. You need to stop being the operations department. And it is something that people don't often realize.
No.
That when they think, oh, I'm the bottleneck, they think, I need to be more productive. I need to work harder. I need to find more hours in my day. And that kills the business.
Absolutely. You whether you're developing building, manufacturing a product, or whether you're delivering a service, whether that service is you or somebody that you've hired to build a service, there are only, allowing 8 hours for sleep and 2 for eating and whatnot, there are only 14 hours in a day. And once you've maxed out the use of that 14 hours, you're done. Your business is as big as it's going to get with you working all the available hours in a day. So clearly the in order to grow, in order to become a business, you need to step back from whatever that 14 hours is that you're doing in order to empower and direct and manage other people to do that work for you while you work on making your business go.
And then we tackle that other bias and blind spot combination of thinking that you are the only one who can do that thing that you do so well. Right? So this leads to, when you do hire, not being able to trust that person, and overestimating your own skills at leadership. That person could be ideal, could be very trustworthy, but if you don't know how to delegate and you're just assuming that they will just absorb it from you. My brother used to be that way. He'd be like, just here's what you're doing, watch me and then do it. He's a welder fabricator, and I welded for him for a year.
Right.
And he brought me in and he's like, yes, do it. And he would get so mad at me because I'd do what I thought I saw him doing. But he was a terrible teacher at the time. When I confronted him, he changed his teaching style, which was fantastic. So I can now, if you need to know how a weld works, I can tell you that, because that's what I needed, right? There's a 4-step process to delegating, and if you go, no, there isn't, then you're overestimating your skill set as a leader.
And the 2 aspects of delegation. So one is the skill of delegating, which is an absolutely learnable management skill. Mm-hmm. There's the mindset to want to delegate and to delegate successfully, and not to have people coming back to you because it feels good or it feels like you're in control, and you feel out of control if you've delegated. So Cher's expertise in having you master both of those things, which is a really large part of removing you as the bottleneck in your business, which for a small business, a starting business, really is the major bottleneck usually.
And to effectively remove you, because stepping out of operations, hiring 3 people, not training them, not delegating, finally firing them and doing it all yourself again. That's another cycle that people get into in their businesses. So you can end up with confused employees and they're calling you and you're putting out fires all the time and it's driving you nuts. You're working harder and it's just proof, confirmation bias that you can't hire people to do what you do in your business. And it also leads to not having systems that are reproducible, right? That's another bottleneck, is that you're reinventing the wheel every time you bring on a new client. You don't have employees going, this is our critical client flow, this is how we master that and ensure that people go through the factory in the right speed and the right fashion. And so instead of productivity, what we really want is not a productive business owner, but an efficient system and an efficient structure that will support that.
And how about the, maybe we talk a little bit about how the organization chart is a very good tool for overcoming that particular bottleneck.
Right, so your organizational chart is a tool that lets you see a snapshot of your business. Right? If you actually put your org chart above your critical client flow, and you understand how people are interacting and transferring that information, it's good to write a name in onto the org chart for each of the critical client flow pieces. And if your name keeps showing up in there, it's a place to identify challenges. There's so much richness to that org chart. Often in your startup business, the org chart's just you.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's all the pieces of the client flow, plus HR and admin and finance. And your name is everywhere. The next stage is trickier because it might just be 2 levels. So now there's you and everybody's reporting to you as well. And so that can also reveal the challenges. We need depth in your chart, right? What's the next legs? And ideally, if you are selling your business, you're up at the top of that chart, and underneath you is the person who executes everything. You're the visionary leader, but they're executing, and they have managers reporting to them who are managing the team. That's the thing that comes to mind when you say, how does your org chart fix that problem?
Yeah, the thought process of thinking about all the roles in your organization, even if your name's in all the boxes to start with. The thought process of identifying the roles allows you to start to think about what delegations would need to happen for you to populate somebody other than yourself into that job. And then, of course, it comes back to profitability and how much revenue is being generated. But it's that mindset of, even though I'm me, and maybe it's just you at the beginning, you're still doing 10 different things broadly in business. And they're not things that you sort of need to dream up yourself. Organization structure and roles in organizations is very well understood management science. And it's easy to build an organization chart. The thoughtful part for you as a business owner is to figure out what's actually in that box that makes sense from a management, a new hire kind of process.
And as you look at the client process underneath it, and you're looking for where are things getting stuck, right? Are people sitting in the sales pipeline too long? Does it take 6 months and 12 hours to sell a client and you're chasing them, right?
Right.
That's an obvious bottleneck in your business. But you can also look at in operations or in quality control and sign off and finalizing the project so that you can collect the money. Those can be some really hidden bottlenecks that just destroy your cash flow in business as well. So it's when you have those acting in tandem that you can start tracking down what's the real problem happening here. Why aren't people paying me? Well, because we're not closing off jobs. Why aren't we closing off jobs? Because we don't have a quality control mechanism that says the job is done and check the box.
Invoice,
Yeah, and why aren't we doing that? Because we don't have an operations system that passes it effectively. Right? So you start looking for the bottleneck, and it needs those pieces so that you can have the conversations to find the real problem, so that you're not just doing that knee-jerk reaction to fix all the things.
And many small businesses are service businesses as opposed to manufacturers, because there's a fair amount of capital involved. Not all, but many. And in a service business, it's very easy to have fuzzy edges to the service deliverable, which makes it hard to invoice. And if you don't operationalize it and think through your processes clearly, you can end up in these unintended bottlenecks related to scope creep or not being able to invoice a client for something that you think is finished, the client doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that the last piece of sales, like sales, I think, if you're in a service business, sales is like 80% of the deliverable because you have hammered down exactly what they expect. You know what they are going to say at the end. You have set all of the frames, right? He who owns the frames, which is a bias, right? How you frame things changes what you can see. So if you as the business owner are framing the entire interaction right from day one, and you have communication with everybody else in that critical client flow, then you can easily make sure things are moving along and understand where those bottlenecks are from a place of, yay, we found a fail point, not let's go blame somebody for things going wrong in the business. Right? And it's about tools, it's about flexible thinking, and it really is about that perspective, right? Stepping outside, taking the emotionality out of the business, building the awareness that this things going terribly wrong is one of the steps in business success.
Yes. Things are always going to go wrong. If it was easy, everybody would be a business owner. So there are challenges,
exactly.
No question.
And so there are some steps that we are going to put in the show notes about some of these biases and bottlenecks and blind spots and how to identify them. So you'll grab a couple of worksheets down there. There's so many more we didn't touch on that are very unique to you as well, that maybe they apply to most businesses. Maybe you have a few unique ones that you just can't see. Often they are tied into that status quo bias of it is what it is and always will be forever and ever, amen, and you aren't challenging things. So have a peek at those resources and let's continue the conversation one-on-one so that we can help you uncover some of those things that are getting in the way of actually transforming your business into the wealth engine and stepping into the 4%. How was that for bookending the whole thing?
I like it. We're looking forward to talking to you again.
See you soon.